this whole event, you know, I felt that putting this together has been gathering a team, actually, of partners, and that there's a hidden agenda, and that's that this is actually a demo, this is a rehearsal for something else that's to come. So if you feel that you intuit where this is going, you're here for a reason, yeah? So perhaps we can collaborate on where this might go next. I have ideas, but you'll have ideas that I wouldn't even think of. So my whole feeling throughout all this is gathering a team together. So yeah, I feel like this is almost like a workshop, a planning meeting of us. So I'd love to just throw that intention out for our time here today. That's great.
All right. Well, good morning, friends. I'm Andrea O'Sullivan. I'm Director at Partnership for the Public Good. And we are here this morning for a panel discussion looking at the themes of migration, culture, and belonging in Buffalo and beyond. At Partnership for the Public Good, we're a network of about 340 community groups and organizations from across Buffalo, Niagara, and many of those are new organizations from the immigrant and refugee community that has come to Buffalo, Niagara in such great numbers and force over the last couple of decades. And so just to share a little data snapshot of that, since around 2006, the foreign-born population of Buffalo, Niagara has increased by 33%. If you zoom in on young people between 18 and 34, that number is actually 75% increase in immigrants or refugees in that age group. And a big part of that is refugee resettlement, which we might talk about a little bit this morning. And Buffalo has tended to receive, over the last couple of decades, 1/3 of the refugees coming across New York State are coming in here to Buffalo. So we see this huge growth, and with that becomes a whole different local conversation around culture. When we talk about this, of course, everyone talks about food and the West Side Bazaar and food. So we are very lucky to have someone with us who will talk about that. And then festivals like the Burmese Water Festival, music in all forms. So we'll talk about a lot of this morning. We're very happy to have with us Tim Bowen, who's a local historian, Bazan Lin, who has been chair of the Burmese Water Festival, among many other things in our community. Yuki Numata Resnick, who's one of the co-founders of Buffalo Stringworks, and Dow Camara, who's community engagement coordinator at Providence Farm Collective and also active with the Liberian Farming Project. And then Owen O'Sullivan, a local composer and musician, and yesterday evening, I think everyone here was with us at a concert where Owen and his brother Mícheál were sharing the songs and stories of Chauncey Olcott, who was a famous songwriter from Buffalo, from an Irish immigrant family. And we're going to start with Chauncey Olcott's story to really look at how has such a now established community like the Irish in America use the power of music to create a sense of identity, to create a sense of belonging. At PPG, across our public advocacy work, we always love to feature artists, poets, musicians, dancers in our work. And part of that is because we feel that can bring you to a different conversation than when you start, in fact, how I just started by saying, here's some data, here's some statistics. Strangely, people can argue with your facts, but they don't argue if you open with this deep song or poetry or someone really sharing through arts how an issue affects them. And so we often will use that as a way to get to a deeper space in this policy and advocacy work. And we'll turn it over to Tim Bowen, our local historian, to speak about who was Chauncey Olcott, what did those songs mean to the community at the time.
Okay, thank you, Andrew. Thank you, Owen, for having me. Thank you all, panelists. So I'll start out with a little bit of background information to kind of set the stage about Chauncey and about the plight of the Irish. Chauncey was born in 1858 on the second floor of his father's horse stable. Grew up in the Canal District, kind of rough and tumble area of Buffalo in the 19th century. But before I get further into him, it's important to know just how desperate and poor the Irish immigrants were, because that will make his accomplishments and kind of what his mission and vision was that much more profound. So the Irish in the 1840s and 1850s, the 1850s is the decade he's born. His mother is born a famine survivor from County Cork. She's pregnant at 16, she's illiterate. But the Irish, let's go back to the Irish first. So they were predominantly penniless, they spread diseases, they packed the poorhouse, they committed crimes, they lacked education, they drank excessively, and they lived off of government public assistance more than any previous ethnic group at that time. 80 to 90% of them were classified as unskilled laborers. One Irish journalist said that the famine immigrants actually seemed like a different race than the Irish that had preceded them just a decade before. Dire wretchedness, appalling want, festering famine had tended to change their character. A Harvard historian said for a long time, the Irish, the famine immigrants, were fated to remain a massive lump in the community, undigested, undigestible. So you have this setup for an immigrant group that almost is going to be a permanent underclass. So I'm just not going to go through it. Andrea mentioned statistics. I won't kill this presentation with statistics, but just a couple to set things up. In 1855, 3 years before Chauncey is born, 2/3 of the Buffalo Irish men lack a steady year-round employment. They're laying railroad tracks, they're digging canals, they're loading and unloading goods. Only 16% of the Irish are skilled laborers. Versus the Germans, which were the other immigrant group at the time, 37% of the Germans were skilled. The poorhouse, 63% of the poorhouse inmates were Irish. By the 1850s, that was 51%. Most of those were Irish women. The Irish received more from the poorhouse, the poor department for relief than any other immigrant group. It wasn't even close. 40% of the prisoners in the county jails during the 1850s were Irish. They only made up 18 to 20% of the population. The Germans, by that way, were another immigrant group at the same time, much larger population. They only made up 12% of the prison population. Even by 1866, at the end of the Civil War, 33% of all the arrests were Irish-born citizens in Buffalo. The lunatic asylum, 76% were Irish-born in the lunatic asylum, and then you have the same kind of statistics when it comes to home ownership, etc. So that's it for statistics. No more statistics, but just to kind of set up just the trauma and how devastated the people were in that decade. And the famine, for those of you that don't know, was 1845 to 1850. Some people say 51, 52. So he's born in Buffalo just after the famine, but the people he's surrounded with in the Canal District are very poor Irish immigrants. They're sailors, they're prostitutes, they're cooks, etc. So that's kind of what he grows up in. So he's a gifted singer. By 4, he's already caught the attention of people. He's singing publicly. By 11, he's singing. His Buffalo school music teacher puts him up singing in front of crowds and building dedications, 4th of July celebrations. So he's got this gift, but for Irish people at that time, you're going to be a laborer on the waterfront. There's no getting around it. So he becomes a tugboat, a fireman. But that's not what he wants to do with his life. One day, his shirt catches on fire as he's doing this, and his mom, who owned a tugboat at the time, said, "Someday you're going to own your own tugboat." And he said, "No, this is not what I want to do. I'm going to do something different." So he leaves, and this is the one dark spot, which is hard to talk about with the Irish performers in that day, as he goes and joins a minstrel group, and he actually does a couple of those, and of course those were a big portion of what they did was blackface performances. That really was the only way for the Irish working class to get into the arts and entertainment. That was the premier form of entertainment for the working classes, both in the United States as well as in England. So there's no getting around it. That's how you get your start. But he sours on that, doesn't want to do this. He wants to be an opera singer. He gets on a boat, goes across the Atlantic, has a horrendous boat crossing. He says, get me off the boat. I'm not going to Italy. I'm going to stay in England. He takes diction lessons, and then he ends up finding that he has this gift where he can be in these kind of comedic, romantic performances where there's singing involved. Almost kind of like romantic comedies with singing. He catches the eye of Lillian Russell, who's a star in the day. And this is now, he's like 27, she chooses him to be her leading man in a performance of Pepita, and I think that's how you say it. And now a star is born, but it's still 7 years later, he's now 35, when the Irish tenor, so this is the Billy Scanlon, known across coast to coast in the United States. He is the premier singer of Irish ballads. He dies in his 30s of alcoholism, dementia. So they need a new star, and they tap Chauncey Olcott, and the rest is history. He goes on to be the leading Irish actor of his day. He would perform in 66 cities on a tour, sometimes performing multiple, performances in a day. While all along, he still has this mission. And I'll just quote from a 1909 interview. His life mission was to, quote, try to help the world along with the genius of Ireland. He said, the Irish gentleman is as fine and ideal as his British, French, or German counterpart. The belle of wealthy Irish society will compare with her sister in New York, London, or Paris. The village priest is as interesting, benevolent, and devout as any of the clerical roles which have been drawn from other lands. So through Shakespeare all the way up till this period in the mid-19th, late 19th century, the Irish characters in plays were these stock characters where they were simpletons, they were drunk, they were happy in their poverty, they were mocked. Even in the Buffalo newspapers during the decade that Chauncey was born in after, there were regular Irish jokes every day in the paper, kind of mocking the Irish. 1856, Millard Fillmore runs on the American Party, the Nativist Party, Buffalonian. It's the most anti-immigrant political party in the history of America. And then their sole thing is to stop the Irish Catholic immigrants from flooding into the United States, preventing them from getting citizenship, the ability to vote, etc. So this is kind of the environment he's surrounded by. And then, as I said, his life's mission, in his opinion, is to try to change this perception that the Irish, or that the Protestant establishment has about the Irish. He's a guest of the future King of England. Grover Cleveland invites him to perform, who's not Irish Catholic, invites him to perform in the White House. So you start to see, by the end of the 19th century, you start to see this change. By 1909, Chauncey, they've estimated, had already performed, and he still had 2 more decades to go, in front of 7 million people on both sides of the Atlantic. Kind of like the O'Sullivan Boys, getting close. So, very close. With TV, maybe you guys are already there. So, but anyway, so. He had 106 children named after him by 1909. How will they know that? I don't know. So anyways, but the big thing are, so that's the performances on stage. He would perform, I was able to read some of the reviews. Everywhere he went, multiple encores, always sold out, 1,000 to 2,000 seat performance centers. Men would be weeping at the end of the performances, which at first I'm reading this going, what could cause you to cry? But as I read the descriptions from critics, the trauma from the famine, even if you were, didn't experience the famine, this longing from Ireland, because the Irish didn't necessarily leave for better opportunities. They left because they had to, because they were starving to death, the famine immigrants at least. So you have this trauma, and then you have kind of this this soothing, healing that his songs were able to provide. So I'll just kind of close with his song catalog. These weren't all songs that he wrote, but these were songs that he popularized, and it's a big portion in the Irish American canon. When Irish Eyes Are Smiling, of course, is the most famous. In his lifetime, he actually thought Mother McCree, which not many people know about, but it's a beautiful song. That's the one that would bring people to tears. That he thought that would be his hit. But My Wild Irish Rose was also a #1 hit. So this is the decade from about 1899 until 1917. You have a series of #1 songs. I can't really compare them to anybody, but maybe like a Frank Sinatra in the Italian community. Not quite a Taylor Swift, but somewhere like that. Always producing these #1 hits. He makes it to the radio era, but he does a couple of silent films, but no talking pictures. And I think that's one of the reasons why he fades into the sunset without a lot of people knowing about him. John McCormick picks up his songs, and he becomes the Irish tenor after Chauncey dies. And then people that are familiar with Bing Crosby takes his songs and starts to perform them in TV movies, as well as he would do tours across the country, and Owen had some perspective on that he could maybe share the difference between Bing's versions and Chauncey's, which was pretty interesting. So just to kind of sum everything up, so you have this guy with a little bit of a dark spot on his legacy with the performance in minstrel shows. I would argue, at the time, that was not thought to be bad performances. Now we look at it in horror, but at that time, that was just kind of the popular working class entertainment. But then you have this gentleman who is able to lift the Irish people up through these performances, through these tours. I bid on a photo that I lost out on, where he's in New York City during World War I, because he was extremely generous. He and his wife never had children. They adopted a daughter who was a very talented musician. They never had children, so he was always giving to Catholic causes or church rebuildings or World War I bond drive. And here he is. So this is somewhere around maybe 1917 on a stage in Manhattan. There are tens of thousands of people. He's got a microphone, and he is trying to raise money for World War I. And I just really was so impressive to see, this Irish American who, just a couple of decades later, they were kind of hidden away from society, and here they were putting him up on stage to raise money. He became a very wealthy man. I think he was probably Buffalo's first performing arts star. Catherine Cornell came after him, and she's considered, a dame of dramatic theater. But Chauncey was really the first performing arts star with, all kinds of, endorsements and his name on different products. They had a beautiful home in Manhattan. They had an estate up in Saratoga Springs, which they donated a lot of that to Skidmore College. They owned a place in Monaco and in Monte Carlo in the Mediterranean. So but all the while stayed very grounded, just known as just a gentleman and somebody who really was able to try to improve the impression of the Irish across the country. So I'll close with that, and there's good questions.
If anybody has questions very specific to the life of Chauncey Olcott, let's take those now, because then we're going to loop in our other speakers to talk about their work in arts and culture and really talk about what effect does that have today. We'll ask you, Tim, more about, you opened with those just enormous disparities for the Irish community at that time. What impact, what ripple effects does someone like Chauncey Olcott have for that community? If there's any questions folks have, including from our other panelists here, for what Tim shared, we can take them now. It's just fascinating.
Did Chauncey ever experience censorship from the Americans, or or anybody?
That's a good question. Not that I came across. No. Yeah, that's a good question. No.
Wonderful. All right, well, let us bring in our other folks here, and we're going to ask them first to tell us about a little bit about their own work in arts or culture, and then we'll go back around and reflect on, does that work? What do ULC create a shared sense of belonging or identity, either for a new American community or for this interaction between your community and longtime residents? And we'll keep going from there. So Lynn, tell us, you have done so many things in the Burmese community in Buffalo, but we want to hear specifically about the Burmese Water Festival as this cultural event that has become very large. What is it? When is it? How many people come? Just tell us the facts.
Well, thank you, Andrea, and thank you all for attending today. And I am super fascinated by Chauncey's story, and as you were recounting of his life, I was keep thinking about, wow, the Burmese Water Festival is all about that. More or less, it is a chance to get on a freaking stage. That's what it is. But before getting onto that stage, here's a little background of the Burmese Water Festival. The Water Festival in Burma essentially is a celebration of New Year. So we follow a lunar calendar, like most of the South Indian continent and Southeast Asia, mainland Southeast Asia, because we have a very strong cultural connection with Vedic cultures in India, and so we follow a lot of Hinduism-based religions like Buddhism, right? And so we follow that lunar calendar, and so the New Year actually falls in April, not January. A Gregorian calendar that the rest of the world follows. So April in Burma is hot. Very well. So most of the time in Burma is hot. It is the fact. Where I came from Yangon, back in the day it was known as Rangoon. The winter time temperature is about 90 degrees Fahrenheit. And so it's a year-long stay in a boiler type of thing, right? And in April it's particularly tough. It's very sweltering, very hot, very humid and dry. And then that's pretty true across the whole country. Burma is a little elongated, but it doesn't matter where you live. April is pretty hot. But around 1100s, the Burmese, the original Burmese dynasties came about, and during that time, most of these kingdoms were centered in central Burma, which is a dry and arid region. And in April, it became quite unbearable for the residents. So to celebrate the New Year and also to just to make their lives more bearable, they splashed with water at each other. Literally, you went to the river, Aravani River, which is the longest river and the largest river. Douse themselves in that cool water of the river and start fresh New Year. By that way, it's also very symbolic. You cleanse yourself with this sacred water and remove all the sins and all the dirty things that you had accrued in a past year and start anew. So that is the beginning of the Water Festival in Burma, and Burma has celebrated the Water Festival for since then, right? So it's almost 1,000 years now, and nowadays it is one of the largest festival and the most recognizable festival in Burma, and not only in Burma, also in Thailand and other part of Southeast Asia. So for instance, Thailand, Burmese call Water Festival Dinja, so which came from a broken Pali word, Sinkanda, which we got it from India. So Sinkanda, we can't pronounce, Burmese can't pronounce Sinkanda, so we started calling Sinja, or then it became Dinja. In Thailand, it became Songkran. But that festival has been celebrated across Southeast Asia and some part of southern India as well. So, it's pretty famous, it's great, and when Burmese migrated either by choice or by force, we brought that festival here to Buffalo, and we try to celebrate it every year on the Grand Street between Ferry and Lafayette, mostly in conjunction with Taste of Diversity. So between the last week of June. And you will ask why the hell the last week of June. I'm going to tell you, you can't throw water in April. You're going to get arrested. So which is why we have to move it to warmer weeks, but not so different from like, of course we can do it in August, and people are going to be like, what the heck, like what was in April, and why are you doing it in August, like 4 months after? So we decided to celebrate and stick it to the schedule of, end of June. And then that's also another thing, here's the logistics. Because if you wait too long, because the last day of high schools are, the last week of June. This is right after that, before these kids go for a vacation or a camp, we gotta grab them, pin them down, and force them to perform on a stage. That's another reason we celebrated the last week of June. So yeah, that's what the Water Festival is. The Burmese Water Festival is.
That's great, and we're going to hear more about what interaction looks like at that as we keep going as well.
Yeah.
Yuki, we said you're co-founder of Buffalo Stringworks, so I'll let you share what is that, how does that engage with immigrant and refugee youth?
I have to say that I think my second or third year living in Buffalo, I've lived here about 10 years now, I had the privilege of attending the Water Festival because some of our students, many of our students were participating, and it was kind of the greatest thing to be hosed down by one of our like 5th graders. And I think she kind of delighted in it, and I was also like, this is amazing. So yeah, when I moved to Buffalo, like I said, 10 years ago to be professor of violin and viola over at the University at Buffalo. And while I was there, I sort of fell into kind of co-founding a nonprofit. So what happened was the music teacher over at School 45 International School, so it's a school located on the west side of Buffalo. And at the time, I mean, the neighborhood is changing so quickly, but particularly at that time, 10 years ago, that school was incredibly vibrant and represented so many cultures across Buffalo. I think the stats were something like over 30 languages spoken just in that school building. Mm-hmm. And so this music teacher engaged some of the professors at UB to come and play a concert for her students. And so, I thought, well, sure, no problem. I mean, as musicians, like that's sort of like a regular thing that we do. And back in the day, it was called outreach, and now, it's a little bit more thoughtfully called sort of engagement, with our communities. So, we happily went and we played, and I think, as a musician who's done a lot of school concerts, there's always been a bit of an expectation of what it is, and walking into that school building, suddenly I was like, whoa, this is defying all of the expectations that I had had. And it just kind of ballooned from there. We played, weirdly, a movement of Brahms for these elementary school kids, and I say weirdly because like now looking back, I'm like, wow, that's a really esoteric choice that we made, and somehow it ended up being the right choice. And so we played this movement, and it's a slow movement too. Usually when you play for kids, you play fast and energetic things and you get them excited, but somehow we chose to do something really calm. And we said to the students afterwards, we were like, what did you think of? And typical responses from kids are usually like, oh, maybe happy or sad, and there was this little boy, and he looked about 7 years old, and he was like kind of hiding under this table, and he sort of peeked out, and he was like, it sounds like love. And we were all kind of like taken aback as grown-ups. Like, I don't even know that we have the language to say that a piece of music or a piece of art, sounds like love. And so we were like, well, yeah, you're right. This was actually a love letter that Brahms had written to Clara Schumann. And so that was like yet another moment that kind of defied expectations. And then at the end of the performance and our little talk, usually music teachers, you line up the kids and you shove them out the door and it's moving. But she let the kids kind of hang out and mill around, and they started gathering, and they like wanted to touch our instruments, and like, we want to play, when can we play? And so I think that too was really different for me because in my previous experience, school concerts were often for suburban public schools, you know, where there's typically a little bit more access to music education, where a violin is not that special. It's, you know, you get a lot of hands like, yeah, I play, my parents make me play, like I know what a violin is. And so to be in this space where the students were so genuinely and just like felt that desire to make music and to be able to use language like it feels like love. You know, I walked away from that building and I was thinking like, well, you know, I have a couple master's students at UB. I'm sure that they would be happy to give a couple lessons a week, you know, donate maybe an hour or two, whatever. So I called the music teacher and I said, hey, Elise, you know, I think I got a couple students. And she was like, well, you know, it's funny that you called because Ginny, one of my colleagues who was playing, Ginny and I are talking and we think we should do a thing. And I was like, okay, sure, let's do a thing. So that was March 2014, and in September 2014, we kind of opened the doors of Buffalo String Works to 17 violin students. And the three of us as co-founders, you know, we're trained musicians, we're trained educators. We were not trained nonprofit professionals. And so we were really just doing this because we felt that there was such an opportunity gap, that the schools, particularly Buffalo Public Schools, just could not prioritize the arts and arts education in a way that really kept students front and center. And I will admit that it was a bit of a happy accident to fall into serving the refugee and immigrant community through this particular school because of our connection with that music teacher there. So kind of over time now, Buffalo String Works is now in its 10th year. And so, you know, 17 violin students, we learned so much. We continue to learn a lot, but particularly in those early years, I think just learning how to work with our community that we were trying to serve, making a lot of missteps. You know, we had all grown up in probably kind of lower middle class homes where our parents were able to kind of drive us to music lessons, or you know, and so you know that right there was a lesson learned. And you know, don't tell anybody, but you know, that first year we had a bunch of volunteers driving kids home, you know, after these free music lessons. Not the safest choice we had ever made. We certainly don't do that anymore, but you know, just like a tiny example of the privilege and luxury that we didn't even realize that we had, and so we had to learn a lot of those lessons. So now if you fast forward, you know, 10 years, I left the organization in March of 2023, but at the time of my departure, we had 160 students playing violin, viola, cello, bass, and all free music lessons. They get about 8 hours of music instruction every week. They're playing concerts. We started a student council. We, you know, like with any nonprofit, particularly a young nonprofit, your mission kind of evolves and grows as you get to know your community. And so we started out thinking this is free music lessons, and that's on its own, that's what it is. And now in year 10, the mission is a lot more specific to leadership development, and specifically igniting this sense of personal and community leadership through music education. And that's where I think the tie-in is here to this sense of belonging, because I think in order for our youth to really kind of stand in their power, they need that sense of belonging. They need to know who they are. They need to, you know, we all need that, but kind of that sense of identity, which I think is particularly challenging for whether it's refugee, immigrant, or just, you know, some of our historically marginalized communities, when you're straddling your sense of identity. You know, you're this person at home with your parents, with your elders, but you're somebody else in school. You're somebody else in your church. So I think our goal was always that Buffalo String Works could be a bit of a second home, where they could actually embrace all of that. and not be ashamed or try to hide bits of who they are, which I think is what we all do, no matter how long our families have lived in this country. But I think it was something I really saw our youth kind of struggling with. So I think for me, that's what Buffalo Streamworks strives to do. And maybe that's sort of the best handover, actually, to Providence Farm.
That's wonderful. And I think it's so interesting that what Lynn is sharing with us is this culturally specific festival, and Yuki, your work takes this classical music, but it has a universal understanding. And I think perhaps the Burmese Water Festival, though it's culturally specific, does too, right? Throwing water at each other, I think, is joyful in the heat for everyone. So that's interesting to me in this conversation of culture and belonging. And Dow, your organization, Providence Farm, is just beautiful and fascinating because it is a collective, Providence Farm collective, of all these specific cultures that have come to Buffalo, and now they're coming together at the farm. So tell us about Providence Farm Collective. What kind of food are you growing? What's the whole story?
Thank you. It's my pleasure of being here today. Providence Farm Collective, it's a long journey. It's an organization of hope. When I look at Providence Farm Collective, I see Providence Farm Collective as a hope for the immigrants and refugees in Western New York. Because most people don't really know the history of refugees and immigrants. The resettlement agency work with them, but they really don't understand who they are because nobody asks the question where you come from and what you really need. And people see refugees and immigrants like people who belong to the factory, they have no skills. But it's a big mistake because these are professional and skilled people. They may not have the degree, but they are well trained when it comes to agriculture. And from my background, from where I came from, in Liberia, I grew up as a farmer. And I went to school as an agriculturalist. And when I got displaced from my country for the past 13 years and being a refugee for the 13 years in a different country, I got no access to land and no access to my own cultural food. I live on handouts. It is a guy who grew up as a farmer, worked alongside my mother who trained me. She was not a degree holder, but she acted a practical farmer who taught me how to farm. And she sold the crops of the farm to send me to school. So everything I lived on was income from crops. That sent me to school, that sent me to university, that take care of families. So when I become refugees, I have no access, I lost my culture. And that's what we don't understand about immigrants and refugees. When they got displaced and they leave their home, they have no access to their culture. And now if they don't have access to their culture, they lost everything. You can even give me the education, you can give me the clothes to wear, you can give me the shoes. As long as I'm not connected to that culture, I lost. And being a refugee for the past 13 years and coming to the United States, I never ever thought that I would ever go back to the soil again to ever farm. Because if I cannot farm in Africa and come to the United States, where will our farm land from? And our culture is actually surrounded around food. And without land, you got no food. And without no food, you cannot build a culture. Everyone of them have a different political party, but one thing we don't have different is food. We all need food to eat. That's the battleground of everybody sitting here. But how do we grow this food? I was listening to all the artists. We are no artists. If you give me a land, I can design the land. I can design with all the different crops. And you're going to see the land very open from the beginning. But I give you 2 or 3 months from now, you get back to that land, you're going to see my hand work on the land. That's part of the artist what I would do as an agriculturalist. But coming to America and have no access to farm land, I never thought I would ever farm again. I went to school to be a social worker. I wish I got my master's degree in social work. And being a community activist and a leader in my community, we just can't have access to land. I can't believe it when I'm a pastor in the church. And one of our members of the church got a call from Providence Farm Collective that they have a land. We don't even know Providence Farm, we don't even know the land. At the time, it was the Somalian Bantus actually was leading the organization that turned to Providence Farm Collective. When we got the news from church, we did not even preach a message. Just to hear there's a land for you to see in the church. We rushed to Providence Farm to see the land. When we met with Christine and other people, he said, yeah, we got a land here. And when we saw the land, the moment we saw the land, something spoke to us in our spirit. Are we getting connected to our culture? Because we cannot teach our kids our culture if we have nothing to show. And the kids that we brought over here, they got themselves found between two cultures. They come home, there's a different culture. When they go to school, there's a different culture. What am I telling them? Even if I tell them this is what I do back home, why do I have to show that they can believe it is what is happening? So the only way we can have them connected to the culture is to be connected to the land. So when we get the Providence Farm Collective, it was late last year when we get there. It was in August or September. We got the land. The land was not good, but we tried to make use out of the land. We planted our crops. When the crops were getting mature, the frost came and killed all the crops.
No.
We were a little bit disappointed, but we took them hope. And although we turned to Christine, we said, can you find something good for us? Although we did not succeed this year, but can you look in the direction of finding a good land? And I don't know how that miracle happened. Christine worked it out, and the next year we were ready to Baton Rouge. The first year we grew to the 3,000 pounds of food. And when we moved to Baton Rouge, we grew now the 3,000 pounds of food. Now the real work started. Now our kids are coming along with us. Now we begin to grow the food we want. And we don't just eat. Where we come from, food is medicine. That's part of our agriculture. That's part of our tactics of being an agriculturalist. That is the methods of being a farmer. We just not grow anything, we grow something that is very beneficial to the community. We lost most of our adults because of food. The food they used to eat back home, they couldn't find no food anymore. They cannot eat from McDonald's, they can't eat from any grocery store. It's very difficult. It will take them time to find something to tax. But they just have to live with what they have because they don't have access to what they need. We're getting the Providence Farm Collective, and we're giving a community farm. We turned the community farm into something bigger than what we thought. We were able to grow our own cultural food. And the food was able to help our adults to survive. We grow food that can help with the high blood pressure, that can help with that diabetes, that can help with the high cholesterol. Many adults that were actually sick and was not well, some that died. But after they begin to eat the food that we're growing now, they begin to gain back their health. We even transported a lot of adults back home because we couldn't find the food that they needed to eat. So they had to go back home so they can survive. But now, I can tell you now in our community, the Liberian community is serving over 33 states when it comes to the cultural food that we grow at Providence Farm. Now people are driving from Rochester or Syracuse just to come to Providence Farm Collective to look for what we grow. Because they need it to survive. They know the importance of it. And we try to tell the people in Western and Central New York, don't take Providence Farm Collective lightly. It is an organization that building hope to 9 different communities. And when you get the Providence Farm Collective, we are not just gathering, but we share culture. The Burmese, the Liberians, the Congolese, the Somalian Bantu, we respect each other's boundaries, and we begin to exchange cultures. Our kids are coming along. We live in the city of Buffalo, we may not know one another, but when we get to Providence Farm Collective on our lunch table or place, we begin to share the culture between one another. We begin to look, oh wow, you lay side my street. I never knew that you lay side me. So right from the farm will be our connections. Now Providence Farm Collective came up with after school summer youth programs where kids work alongside their parents. I have an opportunity to work alongside my children. And I had an opportunity to tell them what I used to show them what I told them on the table. And we all grew those players from beginning up to maturity. And guess what? I had a child who actually picked it up, who joined me as a farmer. She and I worked with Providence Farm Collective, and she had to go back to school. And she loved it. And she's a young person who have a dream, who has something that you look for. But what I believe is when you sow a seed, it may take 10 years to come, it will still grow. You don't know what you plant today, but 10 years from now, it's going to show actually where you grow. So the food is our culture. It connects us together. It brings us a sense of hope. It shows us who we are. You can give me everything if I cannot get, let me tell you a story. Christine and I struggle between my job and the farm. Christine hired me as a community engagement coordinator, but at the same time, I'm a farmer. So the struggle here is, what comes first? Farming comes first, not the job. Even if you pull me up on the table and give me an office, I got to go close to the plant. So when I begin to plan my farm and I see my farm was not doing well, I got discouraged. The money was not my problem. But losing the soul of my plants in the field was my great problem. Because as a farmer, if I get close to the soil and I get close to the plants, I build a sense of hope, a sense of belonging. There is something that I planted and I see germinating is going to become something that I can translate to my community. And today, if I can support 33 communities in the United States, and it's growing across the United States, and it becoming something that is turning into something bigger than what we thought, it gives us a sense of hope. We begin to tell resettlement agencies and other people in Western New York, we are not just a number. We are part of a community. We're here to contribute to society. We're here to contribute to the economy. Whatever it is, don't see us as a number. We are not here to take away from you, but we are here to increase knowledge. We are here to be part of the community. And the more we can be part of the community is if we can all open up to one another and exchange culture and take what I got and give me what you have. We're going to build a better community in which we live. And that's the history of Providence Farm Collective. If you get to Providence Farm Collective, you're going to see a community, not just an individual. You're going to see the different type of culture based on the art that is designed on the field. If you go to the Liberian farm, you're going to see catering and eggplant. If you move to the Congolese farm, you're going to see beans and corn. If you move to the Burmese farm, you're going to see roselle leaf and other things. If you move to the Somalian farm, you're going to, so it's just an artwork. If you get a Providence Farm Collective, just be keen enough, relax and enjoy the weather, and begin to see how those designs are taking place. You see the richness of the culture that do it there, and that what makes us to be here today. And that's what makes us today. If you talk about New Americans, they will ask you a question: do you already know the meaning of New American? Do you know our journey? Do you know where we come from? Do you know what really brought us here? I was not happy to come here. There's no need I leave my country. The war had to take me from my country to come here. But if I come over here and I still don't get what I need, and I still lost, I'm not still resetting. But now being at Providence Farm Collective, we can tell you that it's a place of home. We just bought 37 acres of farmland that belongs to Providence Farm Collective and belongs to the farmers. Where we go any hour, any time, nobody asks us questions. I can work there up to 9 a.m., 9 p.m. I can come home, I can take my kids with me. If I'm tired with the city, I can go to listen to nature. How the birds are flying, how the winds are going around, how the crops are growing. This is a place that is compared to where I come from. Guess what? I'm operating 50 acres of farmland in Liberia. Just because of the dream I took from Providence Farm Collective. And I'm teaching the narrative in my country, in which I'm proud of today that I'm one of the product of Providence Farm Collective. Thank you. And,
That's amazing. And Providence Farm Collective is now in Orchard Park. They started in East Aurora. And for me, it's such a beautiful example too. I grew up outside of East Aurora of the regional community, which often is not engaging with new American communities in the city. The regional community saying, we want to invite you to this land. We have the good farmland outside of the city to share, and a whole network of supporters from the South Downs, which is not always known for its diversity, to say the least, inviting all these communities to come and have this beautiful exchange. So that's amazing. And for much of the growing season, you can book to go do a tour and then have a lunch prepared by the Providence Farm chef. So I really encourage folks to explore that too. I don't know if they're done for the season, the tours, but you do it for many weeks of the year, so that's amazing. Owen, I don't know what you will add after this, but we'll go to you and then just hear a little bit more, I think, about the Water Festival, and then probably kick it open to questions. So share with us about your work in arts and culture that has looked at issues of divides and belonging.
Yeah, and I suppose I'd just love to kind of turn the conversation more around. I mean, we've already heard it's just such an extraordinary group of people here. It's very moving to hear this theme, really, of, I suppose I've always been captured with the idea of Ireland being like this little small case study, like a laboratory test case. It's an island with a small population, and it has this amazing history that I believe can be shared with many other cultures around the world. And I can say, here, we did this in Ireland and it was a disaster. Don't do that. Try this other thing we did a few hundred years ago, and that worked. And I think it's like a little laboratory study. And I've always been fascinated with Irish history and with individuals within Irish history, and how individuals, leaders, can actually nudge things forward or backwards. Because critique is just as important here as, a critique of Chauncey is just as important as the compliment of Chauncey. And we can learn as much in critique as we can. But so I heard three very interesting things here. The first one was, Chauncey's quote about helping the world along a little, just helping the world with the genius of Ireland. So helping the world along, with the genius of Liberia, with the genius of Burma, the genius of 30 languages in one school, And each of these geniuses has the ability to help us all together. We can learn something vital. Each of us in our own personal lives can hear something about Burma or Liberia and go, oh my goodness, that's what's going on in my own personal life. Each of these cultures has a lesson and a medicine for us. So my expertise is in the Irish thing. I met Tim, told me about Chauncey, and I was like, well, that's fascinating. America, he did something for this country, and can we do something today? So what I heard was two or three very interesting things already. The first one was you were talking about how the Burmese culture had to change because of the climate here. It had to adapt. So if the Burmese community had tried to do the same thing at the same time of the year in Buffalo, you'd have frozen. It would have been a disaster. You had to adapt and bring Burmese culture into a new climate. And you had to go to June, or it would not have worked. It's a fascinating lesson there around the necessity of climate, the genius of every place demands a certain type of being, showing up in a certain way. And I thought that the Burmese Festival is a great example of, if we're going to learn from case studies, if you want to do something here in Buffalo, it has to adapt to its climate. If it does not adapt to its climate, it will not work, So there are issues, when we're talking about culture, we're talking about compromise, co-option, commodification. This is where the critique of this, is the Burmese Water Festival, are you selling out by doing it in June? These questions. Are you watering down the festival? That's it. Or is it not as pure culturally Burmese if it's in June? So these questions come up around. You have to compromise. Culture has to compromise. And Chauncey, I could talk musicologically about Chauncey, but the other thing, of course, too, around climate is the food has to be grown. You would speak so brilliantly about only certain food will work here. It will not work in Liberia, or it will work in Liberia that will not work here. It has to adapt and change to this climate. So that's something that really hit me about these two examples. And then your example, Dow, of we can talk about culture and you can try to teach things in classrooms, but until you take someone and, or even get people in a room to play the music, to hear it, to vibrate, to smells, the sensations of culture in a room, it's meaningless. You can't tell someone about culture. They have to sing it, they have to dance it, they have to plow it. That's how it is done, And you can't do it by talking or teaching it. You have to do it by doing it. So that was another thing I picked up. And then Yuki, I loved your example of, and this is Chauncey Olcott too, the artist is a cultural leader. Artist as a leader, And I think this is all about the reevaluation of the arts that our society must go through now, or is going through. It's inevitable. because the arts could not be seen in any worse way as it is in our society today. Our society today, our arts is absolutely disposable and totally unvalued on so many levels. And what we have to do now is redress that imbalance and talk about the artist as leader, as entrepreneur, the artist as social change maker, as the artist as the person who brings people forward and transforms people, the artist as healer, the artist as spiritual leader too. And so we have to start talking about the arts in that context. And Chauncey was touching on that. And all of these people here are absolute leaders and have that sense of the arts as absolute social change. So that was my response, and I think that might switch us around to talking about how you're seeing your work have that real hard impact of true social change.
Yeah, and I want to give Tim a chance also. What do we know? What connections can we draw between Chauncey becoming this superstar who wasn't just an Irish immigrant that then went and sang from the classical canon? He kept talking about the Irish, singing about the Irish, the titles of all the songs, the Irish Eyes, the Irish Rose, it's like obsessive. And what did that do for the disparities, the stereotypes in the Irish American community that they were facing?
Yeah. Well, just to touch on a couple of the things, maybe hopefully this will answer, but Dow's comment about without our culture, we are lost. So one of the things that I kind of focused on is how Chauncey was able to change the perception of the Irish with the Protestant establishment and the other non-Irish. But I think, these crowds that were just in tears, weeping at the end of his performance, they had lost their culture. They had this fracture because of the famine and of desperation and washing up on the shores of the Atlantic Ocean. So I think Chauncey was able to kind of fill that gap. And for Dow and his community, it's land, and I think for Irish people, it's the word. That's our culture. It's poetry, song. And he was able to fill that gap. And I think of Yuki, being this teacher of immigrants, and one of the things that struck me, all the newspapers just referred to Mr. Baker, this public school teacher that shepherded Chauncey as a young kid and kind of gave him these chances. So clearly a German teacher who gave this Irish American this opportunity. And then I think of Len with the Water Festival, and for us the analog would be St. Patrick's Day parades, which now have become a bit of too much of a spectacle, but they weren't always that way in the 19th century. People dressed up in their finest clothes, and it was this way to kind of show the rest of Buffalo that they weren't just poor, laboring, uneducated people. It was this chance to kind of showcase as they marched through Main Street, through the Protestant heartland. They didn't just stay in their own community. So I found these speakers just fascinating, and really can see the old and the new and some of the similarities. So probably didn't answer totally.
No, that's great.
Is that okay?
Yeah.
Okay.
And just a little aside, it's so interesting to me. I have no Irish heritage at all, and then if you haven't picked it up, I married Owen, and so we've been in Ireland for several St. Patrick's Days, and the parades there are still much more kind of localized. And what's really fascinating is, like Buffalo, Ireland has received this influx of refugees in the last 10, 20 years, and St. Patrick's Day has become National Day for everyone. So when you go to a St. Patrick's Day parade in Dublin and Limerick and smaller cities, you have the Irish marching, then you have the Liberians marching in their national dress, and then you have an Iraqi group marching, and it's like everyone comes out in their national dress and marches together. And I just think how that would never happen here. So there's something fascinating to me as an outsider, also looking at Irish America, growing up in Buffalo but not Irish at all. The identity can almost become too much of an internal community where you couldn't imagine an American St. Patrick's Day maybe we can get there, but welcoming marchers and groups from so many different cultures, and
Yeah.
that's why it'd be really interesting. I think Providence Farm has that exchange among groups,
Yes.
But to hear about the Burmese Water Festival a little bit more, do you invite and reach out to get folks from other cultures, to get longtime communities there? Is that a priority, or is it more bring the Burmese community together with itself?
Thank you, Andrea. It's actually a twofold, and I really would like to resonate with with what Dow stressed, and what Yuki just mentioned about the leadership. Dow's focus on the importance of culture and also connection with the land, and the stories of of Chauncey's and how he impacted by using culture as a cornerstone and raise the whole community up. So the water festival, what we're trying to do is twofold. One is that we're selling a culture to the mainstream community so that the mainstream community can understand much better about us, the Burmese. And again, when I say Burmese, it really try to encompass 136 ethnic minor ethnic groups within the larger the Burmese context. And the second thing is to welcome the mainstream community to come and participate with us, because City of Buffalo is most connected to the water. Water is the thing for the city, and we want to revitalize this importance of water through this festival and let the rest of the mainstream community know that this is not just about Burmese. This is about celebrating water, celebrating things through water, and it's really interesting. Since a couple of years ago, we started using Buffalo Water Festival instead of Burmese Water Festival. So we've officially changed the name, and then not very aesthetically, but just trying to tell the story of Buffalo and Burmese together, right? And another thing that I really want to note, Owen, is that yes, we have to adapt because of the climate. We can't throw water in April, but also that is something that has been an existential discussion within the Burmese community, and I struggle a lot, trying to bring that festival to June, and here's the reason why. We could celebrate in April in Buffalo. We could do that indoors. We could definitely do that. We can put these kids on the stage. We can rent a stage, a beautiful stage like Bayville or whatnot. We can do that, but that can only go so far. Being celebrated on a grand street in the city of Buffalo shows that Burmese are here to stay.
Right.
We have been able to block that street whole day, reroute NFTA, which is very difficult. It's a whole different ballgame, but we could do that. We have been able to do it. Reroute NFTA, block the street, bring out the cops to guard our things, right? Bring the public officials and the rest of the community to come and celebrate on site, on Grand Street, outdoor, is to show the power of our culture. That we're here to stay. We're not just a passive recipients of X, Y, and Z, but we are active participants in the decision-making process of the city and an active contributor in the overall culture of Buffalo, which is why we try to stick to the end of June. So, to wrap up, Ken, it's very, our culture is extremely interconnected, to the water, and we hope that through the interconnection, we hope to bring other cultures and other members of the community to come and join us, not just celebrating our festival, but also be with us, on this new American journey.
And Yuki, any last word before, are we open to questions soon that you want to give about what have you seen in the Buffalo Streamworks space for the young participants? Are they experiencing this kind of place where they could feel at home, have this sense of a shared identity, maybe across different new communities as well?
Yeah, it's really interesting for me to hear everybody speak about kind of what individual cultures look like kind of in this place and how we've all made adjustments, and also to hear Dow talk about farming being such a kind of family and all-inclusive affair. And I think that absolutely there are parallels with Buffalo Streamworks, because yes, the immediate recipients are our kids, but I learned the kind of the biggest lesson I learned early on was that there was no way we could do this without our families. I always credit, to be honest, the Burmese community in helping build Buffalo Streamworks, to help us kind of with this foundation. You know, those 17 violin students I mentioned in year one, you know, they started in the fall, and in the spring, I think we hung on to 2 students. Our very first concert, we had 3 people in the audience. And I remember, you know, we sort of stopped and we were like, man, we're kind of messing this up. Like, what are we not doing very well here, and why? And I think a lot of things came to mind. One was the music that we were teaching. The co-founders, all 3 of us grew up in North America. I grew up in Canada. My colleagues, 2 of us grew up in Canada, one here in Buffalo. And so we were taught in a primarily Western tradition of making music. So, you know, the first songs are Twinkle Twinkle Little Star, there was Old MacDonald, and I remember we were doing Old MacDonald. The reason why is because E-I-E-I-O is like 3rd finger, 2nd finger, second finger, 1st finger, open, and you kind of learn the like coordination of those fingers going in a row. Made a lot of sense to us. And so we're teaching this to 17 kids from all over the world. And I looked at their faces and they were just like blank. They were like, what is this stupid song? and I started to realize, like, if we were lucky enough to have a couple kids practicing at home and they're playing E-I-E-I-O, like, parents are gonna be like, we don't know what this is. There's no connection. So I think that was one of the big changes for us, like, thinking about repertoire. So, you know, starting to incorporate folk songs of the countries that our families were from. The Water Festival was a big impetus for us because there's actually a song that is typically played at the Water Festival. And so some of the Burmese parents said to me, like, Miss UP, like, we really want our kids to play on the stage. Can they play this song? And I was like, great. So, you know, I said, and I learned, you know, I was transcribing from YouTube, and so our repertoire really became so much more open. We kind of basic songs that every kid learns, doesn't matter where they're from, how long they've lived here, but we have Nepalese, Burmese, Liberian, Mexican. So anytime we had a kid come in from sort of different community, we would always be, you know, ask mom or dad or, you know, oh, what are songs that are really meaningful to your family? So I think that was a big thing. And then, you know, to the point then of families, you know, I think for me, Buffalo Strings, beyond the kids who have really changed my lives, it was the parents who entrusted me with their stories. That they finally felt comfortable telling me about what it was like to come here, what they had experienced at home. And so I think a couple years ago, I really wanted those stories to be out in the world. I wanted those stories not only because I wanted our kids to hear their parents' stories through music, but I also wanted our community here in Buffalo to hear those stories, to kind of have this sense of understanding of who your neighbor is. So, you know, we ended up giving the world premiere, as Molly mentioned yesterday, the world premiere of this piece called They Would Only Walk. And what it is, it's a musical documentary. It's, you know, I think 5 or 6 parents plus 3 kids talking about their experiences, you know, traveling from their countries of origin, what it was like to walk from Eritrea into Liberia, you know, and that was one of our 16-year-olds telling that story, what it was like to see the soldiers waiting for them, what it was like for one of our parents in Burma to be living in a refugee camp in Thailand for 10 years, waiting to come here, what it was like for one of our students' fathers who crossed a border, and the reason why it was called They Would Only Walk is because she said they would only walk at night. And she told the story of how, because they would only walk at night to fill their water bottles, they would kind of dip it into troughs that were meant for cows and horses, and you couldn't see what you were drinking, and the next day when the sun came out, they looked in their water bottles and full of worms because they would only walk at night. So, you know, I think, so that's where I think, trying to use music to tell stories and to bind our families together so that our students would actually have a sense of pride as to who they are and where they came from. But then also our larger community, now we have more than 3 people who come to our concerts, and so that they could hear those stories. So I think that for me, is how I think a lot about what I hope, and I certainly can't speak for our kids, but what I hope that Buffalo String Life kind of provides for our families. And I'll just finish with, I know Lynn has said to me several times, and this was really eye-opening for me, like you've referenced over 100 ethnic groups in Burma. Yeah. And I guess to see them playing music together and to see families sitting next to each other where actually maybe outside of Buffalo String Works walls, those families wouldn't actually sit next to each other. They wouldn't feel comfortable. There would be maybe animosity or at least sort of negativity. So I think that for me, like Lynn has had to tell me that several times because I'm always like, I don't believe you. But I think that too, just kind of that they can sit and play Burmese Water Festival, the song, or they can play a Nepalese folk song together. And for a moment in time, have that conflict and that strife and the friction not be there.
When you were talking about water, it kind of brought happiness to me because a farmer cannot do without water.
Yeah, exactly.
And that was one of my struggles at Providence Farm College. And being a community engagement coordinator, sometimes I become pain to Providence because I was the voice of the farmers. Just to give me an opportunity to hear their story, what they really want. And the farmers that we have 275 farmers that farm at Providence Farm Collective on their own volition, without no transportation given to them. They work between 2 jobs and their families, and they go anytime. So imagine Providence Farm Collective is closed at 4:30, and the farmers show up at 5 o'clock. They need water.
Yeah.
They need water.
Yeah.
And when we get to the table, I said, Chris, we got to find a way to find water. So guess what? They build drums all around the field. 2 drums for every farmer and fill it up with water. And I'm telling you, every coat I wear, there'll be a C's in my coat. I'm telling you, no one will tell you that a farmer dress well. It's not true. There'll be a C somewhere in your pocket, somewhere, and when they get to the field, even if I don't see Chris, I'm gonna move 1 C, grab water, put it in, and then put water in. Okay? Because that's how important is water. Water is very important. And see you celebrating water. You guys close to my house. I just now know what our celebration is. My kids go there every year. But now from the table, I gotta tell them why you go to. I can tell you why it is.
And Providence Farm Collective always come out on a water festival days.
Yeah.
They always at the table because just in the periphery of a water festival, and it's another added to our culture because when your farmers came out, they wore a very vibrant clothing, and it was always the main attraction for Burmese people. And within the 50 minutes of the beginning of the water festival, a lot of people drifted away from the stage and go to the farm table, started grabbing gourd and stuff to do a fritters, after the party. So it's just really a connection every year that we have with the Providence Farm Collective on Grand Street.
And as you talk about music, there's no farmer who farms without music. We don't. Everything is connected. Okay. If I'm on the farm, I may not play the loud music, but there's some music that I play that connected to the crops, me and the field. And that's what I like to be around birds. We listen to nature, what it says to us. It makes us different from just being in the city that is noisy and go to somewhere that is calm. So you see a lot of the elders are on the farm. They're just not on the farm because they just want to farm. They are there to listen to their environments because that's where we came from. In the morning, we don't have a clock. It is the bird that have to tell us it is in the morning. When it's in the afternoon, there's another bird that will tell you it's in the afternoon. When it's around 5 o'clock, there's a bird that's going to tell you, say, get ready to go home. So if you get on the field and begin to get those kind of communications, it links you back to where you come from. It brings you back to your culture. So that if I begin to interpret this to my kids on the field, they say, That becomes so dramatic. Yeah, because you don't know where that came from. And you don't know how that led. And I got to tell you. And now when they sit on the table, they got something to laugh at. They got to laugh at it. And I love it. And, you know, because it gave me a sense of understanding that I'm imparting something to them that they don't know and they are learning. Because 100 years from now, you cannot even go back home. I don't have access to what I'm showing them today. So that's what it is.
Beautiful, and I think, yeah, I've always really been struck by Providence Farm as, you know, providing these heritage African and Asian vegetables and produce that you couldn't get, but also what does that mean for cultural preservation in a new community? It's such an important part of it, and ritual and festival is such a big part of that too. Friends, any questions, any comments for our wonderful panel, please?
Yeah, Tom Casey. A comment and a question. Owen last night talked about spirituality being woven into what things are, but what was taking place last night. But this has been an incredibly spiritual experience for me, just listening to the five of you. It's amazing. And I don't know, my hearing isn't that good. I don't know if it's Dowie, if that's how you pronounce the name.
Yeah.
What Dowie? Okay. What sort of blew my mind is you said people were dying because they couldn't eat food from our supermarkets. Did I hear that right?
Yeah, that they couldn't get the cultural food they need to survive.
Okay. I just, I mean, I knew immigrants, refugees have incredible cultural barriers to get there. I never ever thought about the food. But the second thought is, being Irish, I don't know if we had that problem. At one point I calculated my grandmother peeled about 250,000 potatoes in lunch. Every single meal was potatoes. I come home for school and she's preparing the potatoes.
We got one crop called a kettle.
Yeah.
And the kettle is good for high blood pressure and diabetes. My wife suffered from high blood pressure. She was on pills. And when we go to the hospital all the time, they gotta give her a pill that she have to take. But I can tell you 2 years ago, she's not on pills anymore. Because we're producing kettle that she eat the water, she eat the kettle herself, she drink the water, she cook it out of soup. And when we get to the doctor asks, what are you doing? Whatever you're doing, you gotta do it good because you no longer have to be on pills. And I gotta put it out of my pocket and say, we're living on kettle. And I'm very proud to tell everybody, you may not like the taste, but food is medicine. We don't just eat because we eat. We eat because it's healthy, it saves us, and it builds a better community. That's the power of food.
If I could also respond to that, you know, a few years ago we were operating summer camps for our students, and again, working with entirely communities of color, large percentage of refugee and immigrant community, and we were given free backpacks of food to hand to our community. And of course the intention was good. But what was in the boxes were not only food of not good quality, but also food that just didn't speak to our families, that may not even know how to prepare, but also not healthy. And I remember it was a tremendously like a learning experience for me, because, you know, I was sort of sort of sheepishly gave our families these boxes, and finally one parent, and you know, we're good friends, and she was like, Miss Yuki, you know, we don't eat this food. And I was like, Etta, I know, I'm so sorry. Like, they told us we have to give it. And she was like, it's okay, Miss Yuki, I will take it and give it to my neighbor. But I think that there was such a point too, that while our communities may have needs, there are also sort of basic dignity of food that perhaps we can do greater sort of thinking around. You know, like from the medicinal and the healthy aspect of it, but also just your basic human dignity of eating good food.
And I think it is so tied to welcome and belonging. And one story I've heard from another refugee staff member at Providence Farm, who I think is your market manager, was that he came from Somalia with his elderly parents, they had spent many, many years in a refugee camp, so not like they had ample food opportunities, but when they got to the Buffalo apartment that had been stocked for them by an agency, it was like boxes of cereal, boxes of crackers, you know, as our terrible Western diets, right? This kitchen stocked with boxes, and the father said, there's no food here. Should we go back? Maybe we shouldn't stay here because there's no food here. And I just imagine how different that could be if, as a refugee, you came and there was food that you recognized in that apartment, what a sense of dignity and belonging, and that your needs would be met in this place. So that has always stayed with me since I heard that story at another conference of how there is no food here. You know, not even, it's not our food, but as your student said, we don't eat this, you know, so it might as well be a piece of paper, like it's not relevant as food, and that's so important.
That's a really important point. Most of the refugees who came to or who got resettled in Buffalo mainly come from agricultural background. Only a handful came from a valley like me. So I grew up with cereals. But terrible thing, which is why I have lots of issues like kidney stones and stuff. But anyway, but that aside. So a lot of our folks came through the agricultural communities, and it does reflect what Andrea and and now retelling of these, and suddenly they're just talking to this Western New York, and there is no proper food for them to eat. The leaves, like for instance, my wife can't survive without that one particular sorrel. We can't live without that particular leaf that is growing in a problem Sun collective. So yeah, it is sad, but as a region, I think we also, again, this is not necessarily related to culture. I'm going to go tangent, but as a region, I think collectively both immigrants and residents and mainstream communities need to figure out how we can promote this healthy living and overall food access as a whole. I think that we need to push that something.
And that was the recommendation I told to Christine to the public schools, and even the resettlement agency. Don't just stack the house with anything. One with Providence Farm Collective. You got 9 different communities. Yeah. You got all the food there. Right? Because when we came, we just go in the house and then you find some biscuits, some stuff, just put it there. That's not food. Although we keep to live the American dream, but we're still not going to take away the dream. Not going to take away our culture, because the culture is embedded in us. If you take it out of us, you take everything from us. And the main thing you don't take from us is the food, because that's the food that makes the culture. And so if you have Providence Farm Collective producing all those food, is there any way you can work with them? Take out politics, take out the grain, but let's look at the dignity of the people that you're trying to reset. Go to the public school. Now something from school one time I found potato green in Ontario. That's how you get there. We got Providence Farm Collective in the community. You're going to find all the different food in that place. You're going to see corn all in there, because based on Providence Farm Collective. We have other Providence Farm Collective around here. We really want to eat healthy, or do we want to throw everything out there, our kids should just grab everything they want? So for us to change the atmosphere and for people to feel part of Buffalo, to feel accepted. Because it's one thing to tell somebody, say, I accept you, and you behave differently. You can accept me, oh yeah, you accept me, you give me a house, but I'm not still getting what I need. It's not accepting. Acceptance is for me to get what I need in what I call a new home. It is a new home. My kids are not going to go back. Even if I take them back, they still want to come back here. But we just still get what they need in their new home. And that's the fight. And that's what Providence Farm Collective stands for.
Any other questions, please?
Yeah, something, this may be for another panel discussion in the future, but something I see a common thread, and even from Chauncey to all the other stories, like where does change within a culture or immigrant group comes from? Chauncey, he may have been poor, Irish, but his mother owned a tugboat. He had the opportunity to travel to Europe to try to further his career. So obviously he wasn't as poor as some of his fellow immigrants. And a lot of these other stories you mentioned, some coming from a low, middle class and trying to help community. So, does it come from within? Does it come from outside? What privilege is involved in? I think part of that discussion can influence individually how we address issues, but even hopefully at the political government level as well. You have to be able to, an immigrant has to be able to work and earn money and have an education. I mean, it helps a lot if you already come here with an education as opposed to like a lot of Irish back then, you were illiterate. It's very difficult to make it in life, so that it's not enough sometimes to provide for immigrants food and housing. There are other things that have to be provided from within or from outside the community to be able to help them create prosperity or advance their own community. So that, I guess that's a question or comment or open for comment.
Can I quickly touch on that? That one thing that we haven't really, bring it up at the top, so far is the entrepreneurship and the entrepreneurial spirit of Chauncey. And then we've been discussing about it since I came to this building last night and also today, right? Like he's such and that's an immigrant story too. Like a lot of the immigrants, even those who came through the refugee camps are very entrepreneurial. And exactly your point, we need to provide these bootstraps so that they can not just as passive recipients of these serial walks, but like active participants in this American economy and have a chance to succeed in their own terms. I think it's actually very, very, very important. And another thing that I want to note is that Irish immigrants, when they came in, they may be illiterate, but they built the Erie Canal. The locks, they figured it out. So I've been very, very impressed by the fact that none of these phenomenal engineering feats were done by these Irish immigrants, figured out by themselves. Very impressive. Yeah.
And I'll just add, I was drawn to move back to West New York and Buffalo because the headlines here look different than other parts of the country, right? Like over the last decade, over and over the Buffalo news is immigrants renovating homes, refugees opening businesses, and starting nonprofits, creating these beautiful spaces of belonging. And from my experience as a policy advocate, they're doing that on their own, right? They're not getting that government support that they could get. I think there's some state funding coming in, but at the city level, they're not getting the support that they could be getting. And Providence Farm brought to our annual policy change process a priority to strengthen the City Office of New Americans. And we can say quite honestly at this point that the extent of the City Office of New Americans, what they are doing officially right now is flag raisings at City Hall for various cultural days and attending ribbon cuttings of immigrant businesses. And that is quite literally the agenda of the office at this moment. There is no budget line for that office in the City of Buffalo budget. There's one appointed staff member. So yeah, I think I am continually in awe of all of the entrepreneurial immigrant and refugee work here, in fact, because it is chronically undersupported for many years. And a piece that we haven't really talked about, but many of the member farmer organizations at Providence Farm, for example, also have their own community support organizations like the Sabali Bantu organization, the Liberian Community Organization, and they are providing for their own communities incredible levels of social services support, referrals, assisting folks in what they need. And some of them have become 501c3s where they can begin to apply for grants and try to understand that process, and others haven't gotten there yet. So I think that's a big area for additional support and growth as well.
Yeah, because we found out that you can resettle a refugee in 3 months and let them go. And you're thinking that you have done a good job. It's just a prerequisite to get them in. But after 3 months, that's the real job. And who's going to hold their hand to take them to social services? Who's going to fill an application for their citizenship? Who's going to help them to even interpret? Now you find kids who are, when 4 or 5 years old, become an interpreter in the home because the parents are not educated. So it drives the community to say, look, we need to organize ourselves. We need to take responsibility because after 3 months, we have to set up a place for ourselves. There's no one going to do it. So we got all these organizations organized, but there's no support. So we struggle on how to educate. Like, you come to America and they place your child is 17 years old. Had never been to school. But the school don't know. They place the child in 11th grade. What do you going to expect from this child? Now you go to school, they're going to call you the child, don't want to learn, you're frustrated. You place a child who never went to school in the 11th child who been to school 7 years. What do you expect from them? They're going to get frustrated, they want to go to school the next. If we take time to talk to our children in school, they look at disgrace. I can't even answer the question. I can't compare myself with those in the classroom. Now we have to open an after-school program on our own. That's why you see the Somalian Bantu, they have to have their farm and use the proceeds of the farm to support their after-school program. We got a library committee, we have a church, whatever proceeds we got, we support our after-school program so our kids can have an extra learning space so they can catch up with what they have in school. These are things we deal with every day. I've been to college and I came to America. My credential is not accepted. With everything I learned, I had to go back from zero. Can you imagine? That's part of frustration. So if you want to accept me, not just a piece of me, accept all of me. Now you make me to be part of society if you want me to be successful. These are things we put you. Get the Providence Farm Collector, you talk about entrepreneur. Right now we have 18 small farms, small business farm, teaching us how to do farm as a business. Although I did farm, I sell banana, but not to the level that I'm running right now at Providence Farm Collective. I got to register the business. I got to do the different type of climate. I got to know what behind the tractor. I got all these things empower the immigrants or refugees who are farmers to make themselves independent. That tomorrow they can own their own land and become entrepreneurs. To make themselves independent. That tomorrow they can own their own land and become entrepreneurs. And that's the only way you empower people. So they just put it on full step.
One quick thing I'll say just about the Irish experience, I think about this often. There was no social safety net when they arrived in the 1840s, 1850s. Very much laissez-faire kind of economics, survival of the fittest was the spirit of the day. And really, if it wasn't for a lot of Irish Catholic religious sisters, the Irish may have been a kind of permanent underclass. It might have gone on for generations more, but the first hospital in Buffalo was opened by Irish Catholic religious sisters. The Providence Insane Asylum, they had seen in the county facility, people were chained to benches. They said this is inhumane. They opened orphanages for boys and girls. And the Catholic Church, the Irish Bishop John Timon, they had to create their own safety net. And yeah, very, very thankful for their efforts.
Any last question or comment, please?
Mine's for Buffalo String Works. Since you started it 10 years ago with 17 people, did you find teaching this third language of music help them in their leadership roles moving forward? Did any of them come back and join the organization as a teacher? And did they continue that musical journey?
I love that question because I think as we got into the work, as our mission became more and more focused over time, that became the goal. So, when we started 10 years ago, our kids were somewhere between, I would say, 6 to 9 years old, so they were pretty young. We're just seeing kind of our first graduating class of kids who are going on to college, and also actually staying with Buffalo String Works all the way through high school and into college. So in the first few years, they would participate during elementary school years, but when they went to high school, they were suddenly in different parts of the city, and there was not a mechanism for them to be able to come back to the program, sometimes purely because of logistics. And so it was work on our end too, to even make it a BSW culture to stay through high school. So now the kids are staying through high school. That's why we have the student council, a student leadership program. We have paid opportunities for our teens, added an incentive for staying connected to the organization, but also kind of deepening the leadership work with them at that age. So last year was our first time being able to hire actually one of our seniors, our high school seniors. So we hired him in our the summer program. He did a great job, and so he remained a student throughout senior year, but then on his off days, he would come 3 days a week as a student and 2 days working on site and training under our site manager. And so my understanding is that now he is a freshman in college and continues to do that job. The student from Eritrea, she left when she went to high school, but then has come back as a staff member. So that's my hope. And you know what we talk a lot about educators needing to represent and the kids in the classroom. That's our goal. So we actually have a teacher training program for our high school students, because in 10 years we want them to be the ones in the classroom. But it's like this, long-term investment, much like PFC, that it's not change that we're looking for today or tomorrow. It's change that we want to see 10 years out, 15 years out, that's going to be permanently embedded into the culture of our organizations, but also into the culture of our city.
Yeah, and you guys done a phenomenal, and PSU does a phenomenal job going an extra mile, even to help these kids, like even a bank account type of thing,
Yeah.
where they can, treating them as adults and trusting them with this task of adulting in an early age. And, it's a phenomenal thing. I mean, you really went an extra mile to do that, and then I've been very impressed. The community has been very impressed. So, yeah, just want to say that.
Wonderful. Well, I just want to say how just to wrap us up and to say let's continue this conversation with a little Vita lunch from Sun Cuisine, a great Burmese Thai establishment here, and just to say that just to hear this energy of migration of new communities. It's an opportunity, there are problems that come that we must deal with, but ultimately this is an opportunity. Migration is what has made this country great, and new migration is, may I say, what will make America great. But it is an opportunity, and the more that we celebrate, not so much an opportunity, it is the future, it is the vision, it's the aspiration, greatest aspiration of ourselves is to celebrate this power that we bring together, and that we're going to share with the world, and with the next generation. So thank you all so much for being here. Thank you, Andrew. And thank you all for coming. And I just want to take something like this together and come together again. Some busy people don't have time to hang out.